She texted, "Sorry babe, the girls come first tonight, on our 5-year anniversary, so I live-streamed donating her dream jewelry to a homeless shelter." By morning, she was blowing up my phone pleading, "I'm so sorry, please give me another chance." I'm a data systems architect, 31 years old, the kind of guy who believes in doing things right the first time, whether that's debugging code or planning something meaningful for someone I love. I'd spent 3 months planning our 5-year anniversary celebration with Vanessa, my girlfriend of what I thought were 5 solid years building toward something permanent. The reservation at Skyline Terrace, this exclusive rooftop venue downtown, required booking exactly 93 days in advance and cost more than my first car, but Vanessa had mentioned it exactly once during a brunch with her sorority sisters 8 months ago, saying it was where real relationships celebrate real milestones, so I remembered. I'd also commissioned a custom sapphire bracelet from Marcus Webb, a jeweler whose waiting list typically runs 6 months but who owed me a favor after I fixed his entire point-of-sale system when it crashed during holiday season last year. The bracelet cost me $8,500, featured graduated sapphires that shifted from deep midnight blue to almost transparent, set in white gold with a clasp design to look like 2 interlocking infinity symbols, and took him 7 weeks to complete to my exact specifications. I'd shown Vanessa a preview photo 2 weeks before our anniversary, watching her eyes go wide as she immediately grabbed her phone and screenshot the image, and I later saw she'd posted it to her private Instagram story with the caption, "5 years and he finally gets it right," with 4 sparkle emojis. That should have told me something. The phrase, "finally gets it right," like everything before, had been some kind of training round leading to this moment of her approval, but I was too focused on making the night perfect to analyze the subtle poison in those words. The morning of our anniversary, I was 3 hours into presenting a major infrastructure proposal to a client whose account would make my quarterly numbers look exceptional, when my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Babe, I'm so sorry but something came up with the girls," it read, and I felt my stomach drop even before I read the rest. "Jess is going through a terrible breakup and we're doing a crisis intervention tonight at Madison's place. She really needs her support system right now and I can't abandon her when she's this devastated. You understand, right? We can celebrate this weekend instead, maybe Sunday brunch? Love you." I stared at that message for a solid 30 seconds while my client's CFO asked me a question I didn't hear. This wasn't the first time Vanessa had prioritized her social circle over us, but it was the first time she'd done it on a day that was supposed to be sacred, untouchable, ours. Over the past 6 months, I'd watched her become increasingly obsessed with maintaining her status within her friend group, women she'd known since college who all seemed to be in some kind of unspoken competition about whose life looked most enviable on social media, whose boyfriend was most generous, whose relationship seemed most aspirational. She'd started making comments about my predictable lifestyle, how I always wanted to stay in on weekends instead of being seen at the right restaurants and bars, how her friend Ashley's boyfriend had surprised her with a trip to Napa while I'd suggested we save money by exploring wineries an hour outside the city instead. Last month, she'd compared our relationship unfavorably to her friend Morgan's engagement, saying at least Morgan's fiancé knew how to make her feel special in public instead of cooking dinner at home like we were already retired. I'd brushed those comments aside as stress from her job at the marketing agency, where she managed social media accounts for lifestyle brands and spent 8 hours a day crafting other people's perfect narratives, but now sitting in this conference room with her anniversary cancellation text glowing on my screen, I saw the pattern clearly. I typed back, "understood," and hit send, then turned my phone face down and finished my presentation on autopilot, my brain already 3 steps ahead planning something Vanessa would never see coming. After the meeting ended, I walked directly to my car, sat in the parking garage for 10 minutes just breathing and thinking, then made 4 phone calls in rapid succession. First, I canceled the Skyline Terrace reservation and explained the situation to the manager, who was surprisingly sympathetic and refunded my deposit without the usual 48-hour cancellation penalty. Second, I called the florist and redirected the massive arrangement of white orchids and peonies I'd ordered, $300 worth of flowers that were supposed to decorate our table, to the pediatric wing of St. Catherine's Medical Center with a card that read, "For kids who need something beautiful today." Third, I called my buddy Jason from college who worked in nonprofit development and asked him for the name of a reputable women's shelter that could use a significant donation. Fourth, I retrieved the bracelet from my apartment safe where I'd been keeping it secure, held it up to the light one final time watching the sapphires catch the sun, and drove across town to Mercy House with a plan forming that would transform my disappointment into something Vanessa would never forget, though not for the reasons she expected. I arrived at Mercy House around 3 in the afternoon, the bracelet secured in its original velvet presentation case tucked inside my jacket pocket, feeling the weight of it against my chest like a talisman of everything I'd believed our relationship was worth. The shelter occupied a renovated Victorian house in a neighborhood that had seen better decades, paint peeling slightly around the window frames but flower boxes out front suggesting someone here still believed in making things beautiful despite limited resources. I asked for Patricia Reynolds, the director whose name Jason had given me, and waited in a small lobby decorated with donated furniture and children's artwork taped to the walls, crayon drawings of houses and families and sunshine that made my throat tight. Patricia appeared after 5 minutes, a woman in her late 50s with steel gray hair pulled into a practical bun, wearing khakis and a Mercy House polo shirt, her handshake firm and her eyes sharp with the particular intelligence of someone who'd spent 20 years working with people at their absolute lowest and learned to spot authenticity from a mile away. I explained who I was, why I was there, and what I wanted to do, watching her expression shift from polite curiosity to skepticism as I outlined my unconventional request. "You want to donate an $8,500 bracelet and live stream it," she repeated slowly, like she was testing whether the words made more sense spoken aloud. "I need to be honest with you, Mr. Chen, we've had people try to use our residents' circumstances for social media content before, and I shut that down immediately because these women are rebuilding their dignity, not providing content for someone's viral moment." I appreciated her directness, the protective instinct that meant she was actually good at her job, so I laid out my full plan without any sales pitch. I'd focus the stream entirely on the shelter's mission, not on individual residents. I'd blur any faces that appeared in the background. I'd include direct links to their donation page and Amazon wishlist so viewers could contribute beyond just watching, and most importantly, I'd tell my story as a way of highlighting what actually mattered versus what we're taught to value. "I spent months planning the perfect anniversary," I told her, "and the person I planned it for chose her social circle over me without a second thought. This bracelet was supposed to represent 5 years of building something real, but instead it represents the difference between what looks valuable and what actually is valuable. Your residents are rebuilding their lives from nothing. That's real. That deserves something real in return." Patricia studied me for a long moment, then asked to see the bracelet, and when I opened the case and showed her the sapphires catching the fluorescent lobby lights, she actually gasped softly before composing herself. "This could fund our operations budget for 2 months, she said quietly, or help 3 women get security deposits for their own apartments. She agreed to let me proceed, but only if I spent 20 minutes first meeting some of the current residents who were comfortable being introduced, understanding their stories, making this about them rather than about my relationship drama, and I agreed immediately because that's exactly what I wanted anyway. I met Diana, 42, who'd left an abusive marriage with her 2 kids and nothing else and was now 3 weeks into a medical coding certification program. I met Shanice, 27, recovering from opioid addiction after a car accident had led to prescription painkillers that led to street drugs that led to losing her apartment and her job, now 90 days sober and working part-time at a grocery store while attending community college. I met Ruth, 61, who'd been homeless after her factory job disappeared and her savings evaporated paying for her husband's cancer treatment, now volunteering at Mercy House while waiting for subsidized housing. Each story reminded me that my canceled anniversary was not a tragedy, just a disappointment, and disappointments were how you learned who people really were before you made permanent mistakes. At 4:30, I set up my phone and tablet in front of a wall displaying Mercy House's mission statement, angled so viewers could see the professional placard but no residents in the background, tested the lighting and audio quality with the same attention to detail I brought to system architecture, then went live simultaneously on Instagram and TikTok. "Hey everyone, this is Daniel, and I'm here at Mercy House, a transitional shelter for women rebuilding their lives after domestic violence, addiction, and homelessness. I started, keeping my voice steady and conversational, like I was talking to friends rather than performing for an audience. Today was supposed to be my 5-year anniversary with my girlfriend. I planned this celebration 3 months in advance, made reservations at a venue that required booking over 90 days out, and commissioned this custom sapphire bracelet that took 7 weeks to create. I held up the case and opened it, angling it so the camera caught the stones properly, watching the live viewer count tick up from 30 to 60 to 150. This morning, my girlfriend texted me that she couldn't make our anniversary because her friends needed her for a crisis intervention, and I should understand that they come first tonight. Maybe we could celebrate this weekend instead. I watched the comment section start moving faster, heart emojis and angry faces and people typing reactions in real time. And you know what? I do understand. I understand that after 5 years together, I'm still not the priority. I understand that something we planned for months could be cancelled with a casual text message. I understand that she saw a preview photo of this bracelet 2 weeks ago and posted it to Instagram with the caption about me finally getting something right, like I'd been failing some test I didn't know I was taking. My voice stayed calm, matter of fact, no bitterness creeping in because I wasn't trying to villainize anyone, just stating objective facts. So I'm here instead because I realized something today. This bracelet was supposed to represent 5 years of commitment, but the woman I commissioned it for taught me that commitment means nothing if it only goes one direction. These women here at Mercy House understand real commitment, the kind where you rebuild your entire life from scratch, where you show up every day even when it's hard, where you value your own dignity enough to start over. That's worth celebrating. That's worth something real. I explained how the bracelet would be appraised and either sold to fund shelter operations or given to a resident who could sell it herself for immediate financial stability, how viewers could donate directly or purchase items from the shelter's wishlist, how Mercy House needed everything from toiletries to job interview clothes to childcare support. The live stream lasted 15 minutes, and by the time I ended it, the viewer count had reached 18,000. The comment section was moving so fast I couldn't read individual messages, and my phone was already buzzing with notifications that something had shifted, gone viral, become bigger than just my personal story of disappointment transforming into purpose. I drove home in a daze, my phone vibrating continuously in the cup holder like something alive and angry, notifications pinging faster than I could process them, the screen lighting up every few seconds with mentions and tags and messages from people whose names I didn't recognize. By the time I pulled into my parking space and actually checked, the original livestream had been viewed 2.3 million times across both platforms, with the Instagram version hitting 1.6 million alone, and clips were already being shared, remixed, stitched, and commented on by accounts I'd never heard of. Relationship advice pages with handles like Modern Dating Truths and Healing from Heartbreak had screen-recorded segments and added their own commentary. Lifestyle bloggers were analyzing my body language for authenticity. Even a few minor celebrities with verified checkmarks had shared it to their stories with captions like, "This is what emotional maturity looks like," and "When someone shows you who they are, believe them." The comment sections had exploded into thousands of responses, people praising what they called my grace under pressure and dignity in heartbreak, with recurring themes emerging across platforms. This man planned 3 months in advance and she canceled over text, one comment with 42,000 likes read. He literally commissioned custom jewelry and she threw it away for a girls' night. Some people don't deserve good partners. Another popular comment said, "Notice how he never said her name, never tried to shame her publicly, just redirected his energy into something meaningful. That's real strength right there." A relationship psychology account with 800,000 followers had created an emergency podcast episode titled, "The Anniversary Donation: Healthy Boundaries versus Performative Revenge," analyzing my live stream as an example of what they called dignified detachment in the face of disrespect, and the episode was already trending in the self-help category. One particularly viral TikTok from a creator who specialized in analyzing social dynamics had been viewed 9 million times, breaking down my exact word choices and explaining why the live stream resonated so deeply. He didn't call her names, didn't expose her identity, didn't even seem angry, the creator explained to her audience. He just calmly stated facts and redirected his pain into purpose. That's what makes this so powerful. He's not trying to punish her. He's just refusing to be an option anymore. The speculation about my mystery girlfriend's identity was intense, people analyzing every word I'd said for clues, with amateur detectives in the comments trying to figure out who I was and therefore who she must be, but I'd been careful not to include any identifying information beyond my first name and the general city location. What I hadn't anticipated was how the live stream would impact Mercy House itself. Patricia called me at 8:40 that evening, her voice shaking slightly with what sounded like disbelief mixed with overwhelmed gratitude. "Daniel, I don't know what you did, but our donation page crashed 30 minutes ago from too much traffic," she said. Before the site went down, we'd received over $47,000 in direct contributions. 47,000. We usually bring in maybe 8,000 in a good month. And our Amazon wishlist, every single item has been purchased, some of them multiple times. We have 17 toaster ovens arriving next week. People are leaving donation messages like, "For Daniel's dignity," and "Because some people understand real value." I've been doing this work for 20 years and I've never seen anything like this. I felt something warm spread through my chest, not satisfaction exactly, but relief that something genuinely good had come from my disappointment, that the bracelet that was supposed to symbolize Vanessa's importance to me had instead become the catalyst for helping women who actually needed support. By midnight, the story had been picked up by local news outlets, with the main newspaper running an online article titled, "Anniversary Heartbreak Becomes Community Blessing," featuring the photo Patricia had taken of me handing her the bracelet case in front of the mission statement wall. Morning shows were already emailing interview requests to the shelter asking if they could connect them with the anniversary donor, podcast hosts wanted me for their relationship dynamics episodes, and a documentary filmmaker who specialized in modern dating culture had sent a detailed proposal about featuring my story as part of a larger examination of how social media had transformed relationship priorities. My Instagram following had jumped from 342 to 78,000 overnight, mostly people who'd found me through the live stream, and my message requests were flooded with hundreds of supportive notes from strangers sharing their own stories of being undervalued in relationships, plus a surprising number of women asking if I was single now, which felt surreal given that 18 hours ago I'd been planning an anniversary celebration. But the messages that hit differently were from people who donated to Mercy House specifically because of the live stream, telling me their own stories about leaving bad relationships, overcoming addiction, rebuilding after loss, and how my redirection of disappointment into purpose had inspired them to contribute to something meaningful instead of just scrolling past another tragedy. One woman wrote, "My ex-husband spent our entire marriage making me feel like I was never enough, never grateful enough for his generosity, even though I worked full-time and did everything at home. Watching you take something that was supposed to be about someone who didn't value you and transform it into help for women who are rebuilding their worth reminded me why I left. I donated in honor of my own freedom." Another message from a guy around my age said, "I've been planning to propose to my girlfriend but she keeps making comments like yours did, comparing me to her friends' boyfriends, saying I'm not ambitious enough or exciting enough. Your live stream made me realize I'm not failing some test. She's just not the right person. Thank you for saving me from making a huge mistake." Reading those messages while sitting alone in my apartment on what should have been my anniversary night, I realized the live stream had become something bigger than just my story. It had become a mirror for everyone who'd ever felt like they weren't enough for someone who didn't deserve them in the first place. And somewhere across town, Vanessa's world was about to crack wide open, because her friends were already sending screenshots and links, asking questions she couldn't answer without revealing herself as the woman who'd fumbled what the entire internet now considered perfection. Vanessa's first text arrived at 6:47 the next morning, all caps, "Call me right now," followed by 3 more messages in rapid succession before I'd even gotten out of bed. "Daniel, this isn't funny. You need to take that video down immediately. How could you do this to me?" I silenced my phone and went for my usual morning run, 5 miles through the park while the sun came up and the city was still quiet, using the rhythm of my footsteps to process everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. By the time I got back and checked my phone, there were 17 missed calls from Vanessa, 12 more text messages oscillating between fury and panic, and a voicemail where I could hear her crying in the background of what sounded like her car, her voice shaking as she said, "Please just call me back. We need to talk about this before it gets worse. I can explain everything." I didn't call back. Instead, I showered, made breakfast, and spent the morning responding to messages from people who donated to Mercy House, thanking them for their generosity and redirecting attention back to the shelter's mission rather than my personal drama. Patricia had texted me that they'd received another $32,000 overnight and the local news wanted to do a feature story about the donation surge, asking if I'd be willing to do a brief interview. Around noon, while I was at my desk reviewing system architecture diagrams for a client project, my office phone rang with Vanessa's number, which meant she was desperate enough to call me at work, somewhere she knew I couldn't easily ignore her. I picked up after 4 rings. "Daniel, finally, I've been trying to reach you all morning." Her voice came through tight and high-pitched, that particular tone she used when she was trying to control anger while also playing victim. "You humiliated me in front of the entire city. Do you understand that? You gave away my bracelet that you bought for me without even asking, and now everyone is talking about it and sending me links asking if I know anything about some viral anniversary story, and I had to pretend I had no idea what they were talking about." I kept my voice level, almost clinical. "It wasn't your bracelet, Vanessa. You never received it. You canceled our anniversary, which made the gift irrelevant, so I donated it to people who could actually benefit from it. That's not humiliation. That's consequence." "Consequence? You made me look like a terrible person." "I never said your name. Never mentioned identifying details. If people are connecting you to the story, that's because you know what you did was wrong." She made a sound between a sob and a growl of frustration. "You're being cruel and manipulative, using social media to punish me for one mistake, for choosing to support a friend who was in crisis. Do you know how that makes you look? Like some controlling, vindictive person who can't handle not getting his way. If that's how you see it, then we definitely shouldn't be together." I heard her breath catch, like she hadn't expected me to agree so readily. "So that's it? 5 years and you're just done? You're not even going to fight for us. You didn't fight for us when you canceled our anniversary via text message. I'm just matching your energy." I ended the call and blocked her number from my office phone, then went back to my diagrams, but I couldn't focus because I knew Vanessa well enough to know that being cornered would make her dangerous. She'd spent 5 years cultivating a particular image of herself and our relationship on social media, the aspirational girlfriend with the stable, generous boyfriend, and having that narrative threatened would trigger her worst instincts. I wasn't wrong. By 3 that afternoon, Vanessa had launched a full counteroffensive across her social media platforms, and it was more calculated than I'd expected. She posted a long, carefully worded thread on Twitter and Instagram. Her profile photo changed to a black and white image of herself looking pensive and vulnerable, the kind of aesthetic choice that signaled something serious was being discussed. I normally keep my private life private, but recent events have forced me to speak my truth, her post began, and I felt my stomach drop reading those words because I knew exactly where this was going. For the past year, I've been in a relationship that from the outside looked perfect, but behind closed doors was emotionally manipulative and controlling. My ex-partner used grand gestures and expensive gifts not as expressions of love, but as tools of guilt and obligation, making me feel like I owed him my complete devotion in return for his generosity. When I discovered evidence of his infidelity the morning of our anniversary, I chose to spend that evening with my support system, my friends who have been there for me through everything, processing the betrayal and figuring out my next steps. His response was to publicly humiliate me by giving away what he'd framed as a symbol of his love, but was actually just another manipulation tactic, using a women's shelter and social media to paint himself as a victim and me as some heartless villain. This is what emotional abuse looks like when abusers are smart enough to make themselves look like the good guy. She'd attached a screenshot of an old argument text from 4 months ago, completely out of context, where I'd written something like, "I just need you to communicate better when plans change," in response to her canceling dinner plans at the last minute, and she'd cropped it to make it look like I was demanding and controlling. She'd also posted a photo of herself that must have been taken that morning, eyes red and puffy, no makeup, looking genuinely distressed, with a caption reading, "This is what it looks like when you finally escape manipulation disguised as love." Within an hour, her sorority sisters and close friends had mobilized, posting their own testimonials and supportive messages. Her friend Ashley wrote a whole thread about recognizing red flags in seemingly perfect relationships, with vague implications about my jealousy and possessiveness. Madison posted about how Vanessa had confided in her about my controlling behavior around money, and how she'd been walking on eggshells for months. Even a few guys from Vanessa's extended social circle, men she'd kept in her orbit over the years with just enough attention to maintain their interest, jumped into comment sections with implications about my trust issues and possessive tendencies that they couldn't have witnessed firsthand but were eager to validate. The narrative was splitting in real time across the internet, with some corners starting to question whether I was actually a wounded hero or a manipulative villain who'd weaponized charity and social media to punish a woman for having boundaries. Think pieces started appearing with titles like "The Dark Side of Viral Revenge" and "When Dignified Response is Actually Emotional Abuse," analyzing my livestream through this new lens of possible manipulation. Several comments on the original video shifted from supportive to suspicious, people writing things like, "If she caught him cheating, his whole victim act makes way more sense," and "Abusers always make themselves look like the reasonable one, this is textbook Darvo." For about 6 hours, I watched the story I'd thought was straightforward become complicated and murky, my phone filling with messages from people asking if the allegations were true, if I had a response, if there was more to the story than I'd originally presented. A few friends who knew both of us reached out privately, their messages carefully neutral, asking if I was okay and if there was anything they should know, and I could hear the unspoken question underneath, wondering if they'd misjudged the situation entirely. Jason called me around 8 that evening, his voice cautious. "Hey man, I'm seeing some stuff online and I just wanted to check in. Vanessa's telling a very different story than what I saw in your livestream." "She's lying," I said simply, too exhausted to even feel angry about it yet. "I figured, but you're going to need to prove that because right now the internet is 50-50 on whether you're a good guy or a sociopath, and that's not a ratio that works in your favor." He was right, and I knew it, which meant it was time to stop being quiet and start being thorough, methodical, the way I approached every complex system that needed debugging, by gathering data and letting the evidence speak for itself. I spent that entire evening assembling my defense with the same attention to detail I'd use auditing a compromised database, organizing every piece of evidence into a comprehensive timeline that would either prove my story or reveal holes I hadn't noticed. First thing the next morning, I contacted a defamation attorney named Robert Kim who'd been recommended by a colleague who'd dealt with a similar situation, explained the circumstances, and asked what I could legally share without exposing myself to liability. His advice was straightforward: stick to objective facts with timestamps and documentation, avoid emotional language or personal attacks, let the evidence speak without commentary, and I could defend myself without crossing into defamation territory since truth was an absolute defense. When a local lifestyle blogger named Jennifer Reeves, who ran a popular website called City Life Unfiltered, with about 200,000 regular readers, reached out asking for my side of the story in response to Vanessa's allegations, I provided her with a complete evidence package. I sent her the jeweler's invoice showing I'd commissioned the bracelet 3 months before our anniversary with my payment information and email address clearly visible, time-stamped email correspondence between Marcus Webb and me discussing specific design modifications including the infinity clasp and graduated sapphire sizing that I'd requested to symbolize how our relationship had deepened over time, the reservation confirmation from Skyline Terrace showing I'd booked exactly 93 days in advance, which required a $1,500 deposit, text message threads from the weeks leading up to our anniversary showing completely normal, affectionate conversation with zero evidence of conflict or my alleged infidelity, and most damning for Vanessa's narrative, a screenshot of her own Instagram story from 2 weeks before our anniversary where she'd posted the preview photo of the bracelet I'd shown her with the caption, "5 years and he finally gets it right," followed by sparkle emojis and a heart. Jennifer published her article at 2 in the afternoon the following day under the headline, "The Receipts Don't Lie, Timeline Debunks Abuse Claims Against Anniversary Donor," and it was one of the most thorough pieces of investigative journalism I'd seen about a personal dispute. She'd laid out every piece of evidence chronologically, included screenshots with identifying information redacted except for dates and timestamps, interviewed Marcus Webb who confirmed the entire commission timeline and even provided photos of the design process, and included a statement from the Skyline Terrace manager confirming my reservation and cancellation. The article methodically dismantled every aspect of Vanessa's counternarrative, pointing out that someone planning an infidelity confession or guilty gesture wouldn't commission custom jewelry 3 months in advance, wouldn't book an exclusive venue requiring 93 days notice, wouldn't maintain affectionate daily communication right up until the cancellation, and certainly wouldn't have their alleged victim posting excited previews about the gift on social media 2 weeks before the supposed confrontation. Jennifer had even consulted with a relationship psychologist who specialized in emotional abuse patterns, and the expert's quote was particularly damning for Vanessa. Genuine victims of emotional abuse typically show patterns of isolation, financial control, and escalating manipulation over time. What this evidence shows is a man who planned extensively to celebrate a milestone, communicated openly, and responded to cancellation by redirecting his disappointment into charitable action rather than retaliation. The accuser's own social media contradicts her timeline entirely. This appears to be a case of someone attempting to reframe their own hurtful behavior as victimhood when faced with natural consequences. The article went viral faster than my original live stream had, racked up 300,000 views in the first 6 hours and climbing, with the comment sections overwhelmingly supportive of my version of events. But I'd been holding back one more piece of evidence, waiting for the right moment to release it, because I'd learned something important about Vanessa's crisis intervention story that she didn't know I knew. The evening of our anniversary, while Vanessa had claimed to be at Madison's apartment supporting Jess through a devastating breakup, I'd been quietly suspicious enough to reach out to an old mutual friend named Kyle, someone from college who still followed several of Vanessa's sorority sisters on their private Instagram accounts, the ones where they posted content too authentic or messy for their public personas. Kyle had been hesitant at first, not wanting to get involved in relationship drama, but after I explained that Vanessa was now publicly accusing me of infidelity and abuse, he agreed to check his feeds and see if there was anything that contradicted her story. What he found and screenshot for me was damning. Madison and Ashley had indeed been at a wine bar that night, visible in Madison's private story around 8 p.m. with several other women, but Vanessa wasn't in any of those photos. Instead, at 9:15 p.m., a girl named Brittany who was apparently friends with Madison had posted to her close friend's story a photo taken at the Capitol Grill, an upscale steakhouse across town known for business dinners and anniversary celebrations, with the caption, "When your friend ditches crisis intervention for crisis creation," followed by a skull emoji. The photo showed Vanessa in an intimate corner booth with a man who wasn't me, both of them leaning close over drinks, her hand resting on his forearm, both laughing at something, the body language unmistakably intimate rather than platonic. Kyle had done some additional investigating, checking tagged locations and cross-referencing other stories, and identified the man as Tyler Morrison, Vanessa's ex-boyfriend from college, a former lacrosse player who now worked in commercial real estate and who Vanessa had always insisted was just a friend, despite my discomfort with how frequently his name came up in her conversations. Another screenshot from a different friend's private story, posted around 10:30 p.m., showed Vanessa and Tyler walking to his car in the restaurant parking lot, his arm around her shoulders, with the caption, "Guess the breakup crisis can wait." The timestamps aligned perfectly with our anniversary evening, providing irrefutable evidence that while Vanessa was supposedly supporting Jess through emotional devastation, she was actually on what appeared to be a date with her ex-boyfriend, and her friends knew enough about the situation to be making jokes about her priorities. I'd been sitting on this information for days, watching her construct her narrative about my alleged infidelity and manipulation, letting her dig the hole deeper before revealing that I'd known the truth from the beginning. Jennifer called me after her initial article published, asking if there were any additional developments, and I could hear the hunger for follow-up in her voice, the journalist's instinct that there was more to this story. Actually, there is one more thing, I told her. Vanessa claimed she canceled our anniversary to support a friend through a crisis. I have screenshots proving she was actually on a date with her ex-boyfriend that night, and that her friend group was aware enough of the deception to be joking about it on their private stories. I sent her everything Kyle had provided, with his permission to use the screenshots as long as his identity remained anonymous, and Jennifer published her follow-up article 4 hours later with the headline, "Anniversary Donor's Ex was with former boyfriend during crisis intervention, screenshots reveal." The evidence was presented forensically, showing the claimed location versus the actual location, the timeline of events, the social media breadcrumbs that Vanessa's own social circle had left, and a statement from Tyler's employer confirming he'd made a reservation at the Capitol Grill for 2 people that specific evening. The internet's response was immediate and brutal, with the comments sections erupting in outrage not just about the initial cancellation anymore, but about Vanessa's willingness to fabricate abuse allegations to cover up her own infidelity. The think pieces that had questioned my motives vanished or were updated with corrections, replaced by articles analyzing the damage that false accusations cause to actual abuse victims and the psychology of projection in relationship conflicts. The backlash against Vanessa moved faster than I'd anticipated, transforming from internet outrage into real-world consequences within 72 hours of Jennifer's follow-up article going viral. Vanessa worked at a boutique marketing agency called Elevation Brand Partners, the kind of place that specialized in lifestyle brand management and social media strategy for clients who paid premium prices for aspirational image cultivation, which meant the agency's own reputation was built entirely on perception and public trust. When hundreds of people started flooding Elevation's social media accounts and Google reviews with complaints demanding they fire the lying manipulator who falsely accused a good man of abuse, tagging the agency in threads discussing Vanessa's manufactured narrative and commenting on every single post with variations of, "How can you employ someone who weaponizes abuse allegations?" The agency's partners realized they had a crisis that threatened their entire client roster. I heard through professional networks that Elevation lost 2 major clients within a week, both citing concerns about being associated with controversy, and that Vanessa's direct supervisor had been fielding calls from prospective clients who'd seen the news and were reconsidering their contracts. The agency released a brief statement saying that Vanessa Parker had decided to pursue other opportunities effective immediately, which everyone with half a brain recognized as corporate speak for termination, and by the following Monday, Vanessa's LinkedIn profile no longer listed Elevation as her employer. Her sorority sisters, who'd been so quick to amplify her abuse allegations and post their supportive testimonials about my supposed red flags, began the predictable process of distance and abandonment once the truth came out. Ashley deleted her entire thread about recognizing manipulative relationships and posted a vague statement about being given incomplete information and always believing victims while also seeking truth. Madison's post vanished entirely, replaced by radio silence on the topic and a sudden increase in inspirational quotes about wisdom and discernment. The other women who'd chimed in with their own implications about my character either deleted their comments or edited them to remove specific references, trying to scrub their participation from the record before it damaged their own reputations. Several of them posted carefully worded messages about the importance of waiting for all facts before rushing to judgment, and learning difficult lessons about trust, which I recognized as them protecting themselves from being associated with Vanessa's sinking ship. I knew from mutual connections that group chats were exploding with recriminations, people who'd publicly supported Vanessa now privately furious that she'd dragged them into her mess with lies, and that several of her closest friends were facing their own professional and social consequences for having vouched so loudly for a narrative that had been thoroughly debunked. Vanessa's financial situation, which had always been precarious beneath the surface of designer bags and expensive brunches, collapsed completely once the subsidy of my income disappeared and her employment ended simultaneously. She'd been living in a 1-bedroom apartment in a trendy neighborhood that charged $2,200 a month, way beyond what she could actually afford on her $42,000 salary, supplemented by what I now understood had been my regular financial contributions disguised as generosity but functioning as life support for her lifestyle. Her car, A leased BMW 3 Series that cost her $530 monthly, required a steady income to maintain, and without employment, the lease company began repossession proceedings within 3 weeks. I heard through Kyle, who'd remained in loose contact with some of the sorority network, that Vanessa had burned through her minimal savings trying to maintain appearances, had maxed out 2 credit cards covering basic expenses, and was now facing the reality that her carefully curated lifestyle had been built on a foundation that no longer existed. Her parents, Richard and Susan Parker, lived in an affluent suburb about 40 minutes outside the city, her father a successful orthodontist with his own practice and her mother a real estate attorney with a mid-sized firm, both of them financially comfortable and socially conscious in that particular upper-middle-class way where reputation mattered enormously. They'd initially defended Vanessa when her abuse allegations first surfaced, with her mother posting a supportive message on Facebook about standing by your children during difficult times and her father apparently making calls to friends asking if anyone knew me or my family, trying to gather information that might validate his daughter's version of events. But once Jennifer's articles published with the timeline evidence and the screenshots proving Vanessa had been with Tyler while claiming a crisis intervention, their support shifted dramatically. Susan Parker had her own professional reputation to protect, and being associated with a daughter who'd fabricated abuse allegations was potentially damaging to her legal career, while Richard's dental practice had begun receiving negative online reviews specifically mentioning his daughter's behavior, people writing things like, "How can you trust the ethics of a dentist who raised someone capable of false accusations?" and 1-star ratings that threatened his business. I learned from a former colleague of Susan's who'd reached out to express support for me that Vanessa's parents had confronted her with the evidence, demanded she tell them the complete truth, and when she'd continued trying to spin alternative explanations and justify her actions, they'd given her an ultimatum: publicly apologize to me, take full responsibility for the false allegations and the actual infidelity, and begin rebuilding her credibility through genuine accountability, or face complete financial cutoff and no further support from the family. Vanessa, still clinging to some delusional belief that she could salvage the situation or that public opinion would eventually shift back in her favor, refused the ultimatum, reportedly telling her parents that she was being persecuted for having boundaries, and that everyone was overreacting to what she characterized as a complicated situation that the internet oversimplified. Her parents, apparently having reached their limit with her justifications and recognizing that continuing to support her financially would be implicitly endorsing her behavior, followed through completely, cutting off the supplemental income they'd been quietly providing for years, canceling the credit card that her father had co-signed on during college, and making clear that she was on her own until she demonstrated genuine remorse and accountability. By mid-November, roughly 2 months after our anniversary disaster, Vanessa had lost her job, her car, her apartment, most of her friend group, and her family's financial support. Watching the life she'd built through a combination of my subsidies, her parents' help, and credit she couldn't actually afford dissolve into a reality she'd never prepared for, where her choices had consequences and her looks couldn't charm her way out of the hole she'd dug. Vanessa appeared at my townhouse on a rainy Tuesday evening in late November, 2.5 months after our anniversary, without warning or invitation, and I knew the moment I saw her through the peephole that she'd reached the bottom of whatever descent she'd been in. She looked fundamentally different from the polished, confident woman I'd dated for 5 years, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that suggested practicality rather than style, wearing jeans that looked slightly too big and a jacket that had seen better seasons, dark circles under her eyes that no amount of makeup could have hidden though she wasn't wearing any, the whole effect being someone who'd stopped performing and started just surviving. I opened the door but didn't invite her in, standing in the doorway with one hand on the frame, creating a physical boundary she'd have to acknowledge. "Daniel, thank you for answering," she started, her voice smaller than I remembered, lacking the confident edge that used to punctuate every sentence. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I really need to talk to you. Can I come in? Just for a few minutes." I stepped back and let her enter, not out of kindness but out of curiosity about what final play she thought she had left, and she walked into my living room like someone entering a museum of their former life, her eyes scanning the space that had once been familiar territory, looking for changes or signs of how I'd moved on. She sat on the edge of my couch without being invited, her hands twisted together in her lap, and I remained standing near the doorway, maintaining distance and making clear this wasn't a social visit between equals. "I've lost everything," she began, and I could see her struggling between the rehearsed speech she'd prepared and the genuine desperation leaking through. "My job, my apartment, I've been couch surfing between people who barely tolerate having me there, and my parents cut me off completely. I'm working retail now, minimum wage at a clothing store in the mall, and I can barely afford to eat most days. Everything fell apart so fast and I need help, Daniel. I need someone who understands that I made mistakes, but I'm not a monster." I said nothing, just watched her with the same neutral expression I'd use reviewing code for errors, waiting for her to continue. "Tyler was a mistake, a stupid, impulsive mistake that meant absolutely nothing," she continued, tears starting to form though I couldn't tell if they were genuine or tactical. "I panicked about how serious we were getting about the idea of marriage and commitment and forever, and he represented something easy and familiar and non-threatening. But he was just a distraction from my own fear. What we had, what you and I built for 5 years, that was real. That mattered. I realize that now that I've lost it and lost everything else too." The tears were flowing freely now, her voice breaking in that particular way that used to trigger my protective instincts but now just felt like watching a performance I'd seen too many times. "I'm not asking to get back together right away," she said, shifting strategies when my expression didn't change. "I know I destroyed your trust and I know I'd have to earn that back over time. I'm just asking for help getting back on my feet, maybe a small loan to cover security deposit on a room somewhere, or a reference for job applications, just something to stop the freefall. And maybe, once I'm stable again, we could talk about whether there's any possibility of trying again, of rebuilding what I destroyed." I let her words hang in the air for a long moment, watching her face cycle through hope and desperation and calculation, and then I pulled out my phone without saying anything. Her expression shifted to confusion as I scrolled through my photos, finding the folder I'd kept specifically for this moment, the screenshots Kyle had sent me that I'd held back from Jennifer's articles, the evidence I'd been saving for when Vanessa inevitably tried to rewrite history one more time. I turned the phone toward her, showing her the first screenshot, the photo from Brittany's close friend's story showing Vanessa and Tyler in the intimate booth at the Capitol Grill, timestamp visible, her hand on his arm, both of them laughing. Her face went white. "I've had these since about 18 hours after our anniversary," I said, my voice quiet and level, no anger in it because anger would suggest I still cared enough to be hurt. "I knew about Tyler before you even finished your first fake apology text. I knew you lied about the crisis intervention. I knew you were with him while I was donating your bracelet. I've known everything from the beginning." I scrolled to the next screenshot, then the next, the parking lot photo, the other images that documented her evening while she was supposedly supporting a heartbroken friend. "Every lie you told, every narrative you tried to spin, every person you tried to turn against me with your abuse allegations, I was always 3 steps ahead because I actually did the work of verifying information before reacting." Vanessa opened her mouth but no sound came out, her brain visibly trying to recalibrate, to find some angle that would work now that she realized the foundation of her approach had been compromised from the start. "But you didn't," she finally managed. "You didn't release these to that blogger. You could have destroyed me completely from the beginning, but you held back." "I released exactly enough to prove my innocence and let you destroy yourself," I corrected. "You did that, Vanessa. Not me. I just documented it." She tried one more pivot, her voice taking on a pleading quality that was probably genuine desperation now rather than manipulation. "Daniel, please. I know I hurt you. I know I lied and cheated and made everything worse by trying to cover it up. But I'm drowning here. I've lost my job, my home, my family won't talk to me, I have nowhere to go and nobody left who'll help me. You're a good person. You proved that with the shelter donation. Can't you find it in yourself to help me one more time, not as your girlfriend but just as another human being who's struggling?" I looked at her, really looked at her, seeing not the woman I'd loved but the person who'd been willing to destroy my reputation with false abuse allegations to protect her own image, who'd chosen her ex-boyfriend over 5 years of commitment, who'd never once taken genuine accountability without being forced to by overwhelming evidence. You had a man who planned 3 months in advance for one special evening with you, I said quietly. You had someone who commissioned custom jewelry and spent hours thinking about what would make you happy. You had stability, consistency, someone who showed up and followed through and actually meant what he said. You traded all of that for validation from an ex-boyfriend and social media attention from friends who abandoned you the second things got difficult. I walked to the door and opened it, rain still falling steadily outside, the sound of it hitting the pavement filling the silence between us. You made your choice, Vanessa. You chose Tyler over our anniversary. You chose your friend's approval over our relationship. You chose to lie about abuse rather than accept responsibility. You chose your image over your integrity at every single decision point. Those were your choices. Now live with them. She stood up slowly, realization finally settling over her that there would be no loan, no reference, no second chance, no help of any kind, that I'd become the boundary she could no longer cross. I made a mistake, she whispered, one last attempt. You made a series of calculated decisions, I corrected. There's a difference. Mistakes are accidents. What you did was deliberate. She walked to the door, paused in the threshold like she might say something else, then just walked out into the rain, her shoulders hunched against the weather and the weight of consequences she'd never imagined would actually land on her. I watched her disappear down the street, probably heading to whatever temporary couch was hosting her that week, then closed the door and went back to my evening, feeling nothing but relief that I'd finally closed a chapter that should have ended months ago. 6 months later, I was in a relationship with Claire, a veterinarian I'd met through Mercy House's volunteer program when Patricia had organized a fundraiser and invited major donors. Claire was everything Vanessa had pretended to be but never was, someone who appreciated thoughtfulness over grand gestures, who had her own career and her own money and her own life that she invited me to join rather than expecting me to fund. She'd never once compared me to other men, never made me feel like I was failing some invisible test, never treated my planning ahead as controlling rather than caring. Meanwhile, I heard through the extended network that Vanessa had moved to Arizona, working retail in Scottsdale, living with a roommate in a situation that was reportedly tense and unstable, still occasionally searching her own name online to see if the story had faded from the internet enough that she could return to the city without being immediately recognized. The Mercy House donation had grown to over $200,000 in the months following the viral livestream, funding renovations to their facility, expanding their childcare services, and helping 47 women transition into permanent housing, and Patricia had named a new common room after me despite my protests that I didn't deserve recognition for redirecting my own disappointment. The bracelet itself had been appraised at $9,200 and sold to a collector, with the full amount going directly into the shelter's operating fund, meaning the gift I'd intended for Vanessa had ultimately helped more people than she'd ever helped in her entire life. I never regretted the live stream, never regretted the donation, never regretted walking away from someone who'd shown me exactly who she was once the consequences arrived, and I never looked back at what I'd lost because I'd gained something infinitely more valuable, the knowledge of what I actually deserved and the strength to demand it.